Hello, fabulous ladies and fabulous gentlemen. And if you're not fabulous, that's okay. I'm not really that fabulous either, so we can be non fabulous together. Someone in the comments asked a little while ago, is it weak to open up to women about stuff that you're struggling with in a relationship? And I assume he's talking more about like a proper relationship, but for the intents and purposes, it's all kind of the same thing for the point of this question. So I might actually answer this by responding to an old article that my beautiful girlfriend wrote a little while ago. And this article was called Imi's Thoughts on Being Alpha. And she wrote this article for my website quite a few years ago, 3 years ago. So at the time, we'd been together for about 2.5 years. And look at the date on this article. My God, April 2020. Can anyone think of anything interesting or unusual that might have happened in April of 2020? I can't think of much at all, so maybe there's nothing interesting about that date. But so she wrote this article about her ideas of, or her answer essentially to this question. And it wasn't directly to this question, obviously. This question was a recent question. This article was 3 years ago, but I think it kind of answers from a woman's point of view. You know, it's a nice answer to this question. So we'll take a little trip down memory lane. I will read out this article and maybe I'll talk about some of the differences in our relationship as well, because at this point in time, we've been together for 5.5 or so years. So more than double the amount of time that we'd been together when she wrote this article. So she says, I've mentioned it a few times, but I used to be very emotionally closed off. Sharing any emotional vulnerabilities with Andy was an ordeal and a half. Yeah, it was. Oh my God. When we, for the first 6 months of us seeing each other, and we started out very casual. It was just casual sex, friends with benefits. But she had a lot of resistance to intimacy, to affection. She was very happy to have sex, and sex was wild and passionate and crazy and fun. But any sort of feelings or I guess you could say affection was weird for her. And there were reasons behind that. And she's talked about them on this channel. She's talked about her sexual trauma that she went through as a child. And she's talked about the fact that her parents were divorced. And it was a pretty messy divorce when she was quite young. She was about 8. Actually, I think she was older than that. Whatever. It was when she was young. And both of those things combined meant that she had some weird feelings around the idea of intimacy and affection and holding hands in public and stuff like that. So yeah, it's funny looking back on all of that shit now, because like I said, it's 5.5 years now and she's a completely different person. She has been for several years. She was already a different person when she wrote this article. This was 2.5 years into our relationship. So it's funny to look back on some of the stuff that we've both forgotten about. Andy has been incredibly patient and persistent to get me to share my worries and fears. In turn, he has also shared his own doubts and insecurities. He tells me all of the time things that he might be scared about, things he struggles with, things that are getting him down, and things that worry him. This has had a huge impact in helping me feel comfortable being more vulnerable. And again, the original question that the commenter asked was, is it weak to open up and share things with women that you're struggling with? And the answer is no. And we'll talk about how to open up at the end of this podcast. Actually, we can talk about it now. So I've done several podcasts on it. This one's probably the most relevant. It's called How to Be Vulnerable But Masculine. And there's a similar one that I did that was called Be Vulnerable But Don't Be Weak. And then I've done 3 or 4 other podcasts about this. And I've done articles in my coaching program. One of the videos that's a members only video that people get access to is a whole nother video about how to open up, while still retaining your masculinity. Because that can be something that a lot of guys have a lot of stories about. I think generally speaking, women are pretty decent at being vulnerable. And there's lots of exceptions out there. A lot of people struggle with vulnerability, but I think men especially have a lot of strong stories around, I can't open up because it wouldn't be masculine. So the short version, you can just search for these 2 podcasts on Spotify, on my Spotify. But the short version is you open up in a way where you're talking about what you're going to do about the thing. So rather than just dumping it like it's a burden, and this applies to women too, this is very useful for any of you ladies listening, rather than saying, oh man, I have this problem and it's not fair, which often feels like we're just sort of dumping a burden on someone else. And we're not trying to, but like that's how it feels to the other person. It can feel a bit heavy. It can feel a bit like, well, why are you making this my problem? And so the way that I have found that really helps me to be vulnerable and honest and share is I will talk about the thing that I might be struggling with, or talk about the thing that might be scaring me, or, whatever it might be. And then I'll say, and here's what I think I'm going to do to start working towards it, like towards working towards a solution. So I might say, like, I don't know, let's pick an example. Let's say, I'm scared that I will not make enough money this month to pay all the bills, right? And so rather than just saying, oh, I'm really scared that I won't be able to pay the bills, how I would phrase that is, yeah, I'm a little bit scared that I won't have enough money to pay the bills. So, I'm working on it. I'm going to make the money. I'm going to make it happen. So I'll talk about basically my plan of action, or the fact that I know that I'll be okay, or any of those kind of things, where it's not like I'm not dumping the burden on the other person. So that's the short version of how to be vulnerable, but still be masculine. But maybe I will take away the word masculine, because again, this is useful advice for women too. So how to be vulnerable, but not dump your problems on the other person. So I'll keep reading. Being younger and more experienced, I've often felt like I was completely clueless. Man, it's funny. Like, she really doesn't feel like any of this anymore. And she and I have said this several times. Like, we often forget the fact now that she's younger than me. Like, it just doesn't come into our heads. I haven't had that thought for like a year maybe. And even then, like, the last time I had that thought, it was like a fleeting thought of like, oh yeah, Imogen's younger than me. Like, I forget that most of the time. It doesn't really resonate that Imogen is younger or more inexperienced. Like, obviously she is younger, obviously she is more inexperienced, but we've just grown and done so many things together over the last 5.5 years. It feels like we're peers, like we're equals. But at the time of writing this article, yeah, she did feel younger. She did feel a bit more clueless. She did look to me for guidance and answers a lot, whereas now she has all the answers inside her. She always did. All of you all have the answers inside yourself. It's just that usually we don't check there, do we? We check to external sources. Hey, Mr. Guru. Hey, Mr. Expert, can you please tell me the answer? Hey, book, can you tell me the answer? We often don't listen to our own, or look inside ourselves and listen to our own intuition. So she goes on to say, it felt like I'd missed out on the secret guide to life and everybody else had a copy. Okay, we literally this morning had a conversation where she said, man, I'm so grateful. I feel like I have been given the secret guide to life, and everybody else is a little bit not everybody, but like lots of other people are going around clueless. They don't really understand how life works. They don't understand all of the beautiful gifts that we have both been given, from all of the books we've read, all of the people that have sort of helped us, I don't know, I guess look inside ourselves for the answer is a clumsy way of saying that. But yeah, the point is we literally had a conversation this morning about the opposite of what she has said here. Isn't that funny? So in like 3 years, she's gone the complete opposite. I have too. But yeah, she really did used to feel like she didn't have her shit together. Now she's like, I have my shit together. And not perfectly, neither do I, but she has a pretty damn good grasp of life, and now her mission is to try and help other people with that, and listen to other people and love other people and be there for them in whatever way she can. So that's interesting, because I haven't read this article in like a couple of years. Again, she wrote this like 3 or so years ago. So she goes on to say, the feeling was amplified tenfold being in a relationship and comparing myself to someone else. I've always looked up to Andy as a man that was very sure of himself and had his shit together, but quite often this was a daunting standard that I thought I needed to match. Yeah, and that's one of the things if you're, I'm going to talk about a separate article in a second, this article here, like there's no such thing as alpha. If you're putting all this pressure on yourself, especially as a man, to be like an alpha male and to be perfect all the time and never share anything and never have any vulnerabilities and never have anything you're working on and somehow just be a perfect statue or something, like you're just a god who has his life together, that doesn't really open the door for intimacy and connection with other human beings. And I'm not just talking about in relationships, like even things like friendships. If there's no vulnerability there, if there's no honesty there, which is another word for vulnerability, if there's no honesty there, then is there really a deep connection, or is there just two people putting on masks and pretending to connect with each other and doing their best to connect. But like, vulnerability is, at least in my life, the beautiful stuff. It's the gorgeous stuff. It's the amazing actual connection that I think most of us are looking for, because most of us want several things. We want to be happy, we want to be loved, and we want to be understood. It's very hard to be loved if the person doesn't really know who the fuck you are. It's very hard to be understood if you don't let the other person know who you actually are. And so I've found in my own life, being honest and being authentic, which I am obviously with all of you, but in the case of my girlfriend especially, being honest and just letting everything that's in my heart out, like letting it all out, has just been such a beautiful way to open the door to that intimacy and that connection and that understanding that I think most of us want, right? I haven't met a person yet who says, no, I don't want to be understood. Like, I've never met that person. And it's very hard to be understood if the other person doesn't know what's going on in your head or in your heart. So I'll keep reading. She says, I built up most of these worries in my head. And he was actually always very open and honest. I mean, she says that like, in hindsight now, we both look back and, I was doing my best, but honesty is something that it's taken me quite a few years to get decent at. And so, if any of you want to be more honest and authentic and you really struggle at first, or you're really scared, or you're like, but what if people reject me? Or what if people think I'm weak? Which that was the point of this question, right? Again, the question was, is it a sign of weakness, or will women think I'm weak if I really open up and share my struggles and share myself? If you have those fears, which I used to, you can just take little baby steps, you know what I mean? You don't have to wake up on day one and be Captain Honesty. This article is probably the most relevant one that I've ever written, like on this topic, where I talk about the fact that I see honesty as an ideal that you work towards. In other words, you don't have to wake up one day and just, like I said, be Captain Honesty and be 100% honest. It's just something that you improve at a little bit. It's like a skill that you can practice and get better and better at. So that's all I ever did. I just slowly improved my honesty. But yeah, it's interesting that she saw me as very honest from the start. To be fair, I was pretty fucking honest and open from the very beginning. I definitely shared, and that's the point of this article that she wrote, even 3 years ago she wrote this. That was the point of this article. She's like, wow, Andy's always been pretty honest and open with me. And I was doing my best. I was pretty honest. I was. So she says, in retrospect, I think I subconsciously projected expectations that he would be closed off and he wouldn't let me in. Yeah, I think she projected that because, her father in particular was very closed off. Her mother was too, like with each other. Her mother and her father were closed off with each other. So I think she just assumed that. And also because our relationship started off quite casual and sexual and it was like 100% BDSM. I think a lot of people have an expectation that casual sex has no intimacy, no closeness, no connection, no honesty, no vulnerability. It's just two people using each other or something like that. And plenty of people do that. That's their style of casual sex. But no, it's not really the casual sex that I want or that I participate in. She goes on to say, it wouldn't surprise me if it was because of my past personal experiences. Okay, so she literally says, she goes on to say what I just said. I'd hate to think what our relationship would have been like if Andy had put up an unwavering alpha facade. If he never let me in, I'd hate to think how miserable I would have been. In hindsight, she probably just would have broken up with me. Andy has always been a very grounding force, helping me through my struggles, and for me, he embodies a strong and stoic masculine figure in my life, but that has come with the fact that he admits sometimes he's a fuck-up. That's a funny way of phrasing that. We wouldn't use that phrasing anymore, but I like that phrasing, actually. Yeah. I know that he has struggles too, and he reminds me that he wasn't always where he is now. It's given me permission to suck. It's allowed me to give myself permission to open up, be honest about my flaws, and better accept the fact that I won't be perfect in our relationship either. Yeah, and that's a beautiful thing that happens when you can open up and be honest. And by the way, if you're a woman listening, all of these things can apply to you too. You don't have to wait for your man to start being more honest. You can be honest. There's a woman in my coaching program right now who's really embracing deep honesty. And she was always pretty honest in her past relationships, but she's really embracing deep honesty and just being upfront and being authentic. And so you don't have to wait for the man to do it. Like all of my content, by the way, even if I refer to men in an article or a video or a podcast, or if I refer to women, like these are pretty much universal concepts, like pretty much everything I talk about. So yeah, this applies to anyone really. We can all be a little bit more honest if we want to. And a beautiful thing happens when we open up and we're more honest and we talk about the things that we're not great at and we admit the things that we're struggling with and, we come up with solutions and we talk about those solutions and all of that beautiful stuff. It allows the other person, or it gives the other person a little bit of courage to be honest and vulnerable themselves, and to be listened to and to talk and to share their experiences and to be understood as well. And then it's two souls, or I guess in the case of my relationship, right, it's multiple souls because, we date women together, but, it's multiple souls or two souls coming together and sharing themselves and actually having that intimacy and that connection that, as I said before, I think most of us are seeking that out. Yeah, it's why you get into a relationship, right? You're like, I want the other person to understand me as best they can and as best as I can be understood. I would love some love from them. I'd love to give love to myself. I'd love to give love to them. Like, that's why we get into a relationship in the first place, right? I don't think people get into a relationship to be less understood or to be misunderstood. Again, I haven't found a human being who wants to be misunderstood. So when you're able to go first and be that honest, authentic self, and again, if you're not great at that, that's okay. You can, as this says, give yourself permission to suck and just slowly improve at it. But when we go first, most of the time the other person reciprocates and gives it back to us. I say all the time, the universe is a mirror. If you go first and you're deeply honest and you're deeply authentic, most people reflect that back to you. And if somebody doesn't reflect that back to you, hey, some people just take a little while to open up. So you can, be patient with that if you want to. Or you can just go and find someone else who's willing to be honest and, understanding with you. So she goes on to say, yes, Andy still feels a million times more stoic and strong than I am. She doesn't really say that anymore. But I also remind myself that he's human. It gives me permission to be human too. If anything, I admire Andy more because of his struggles. I respect that he recognizes his flaws and how he overcomes adversity. It's like the saying about bravery, that you're not brave for not feeling fear, you're brave for facing it. It feels like the same thing here. Andy is a strong man that I respect because of his struggles, not in spite of them. So yeah, that kind of answers the original question, right? Like, will women think that it's weak if I open up? Now, I can give some caveats and say, yeah, there's going to be some women out in the world that think it's weak to open up. There's going to be some men out there that think it's weak to open up. At the end of the day, do whatever you want to do. And all of my content, is me saying what has worked for me saying what I like, me saying what my clients seem to enjoy and what most of the community likes. But it's certainly not a prescription. If you don't want to open up, you don't have to. Like, it's your life. But I've just found that beautiful stuff happens when I open up. And looking back, it didn't feel nice to be closed off. I always felt like I had something to prove or something to defend, or like I was vulnerable. Ironically, when I wasn't vulnerable and when I wasn't honest, I actually felt more fucking vulnerable, because I was like, what if anyone ever thinks I'm weak? What if anyone ever thinks that I'm, a beta male, or I'm not an alpha male, or something, bad about me? Whereas as I've over the years practiced my honesty and my authenticity and gotten to a place of deep openness, what the fuck can someone say that would hurt me? And I run a YouTube channel. Occasionally you get negative comments. You occasionally get a negative email. But none of that stuff hurts, because it's like, well, I was already open. What could you possibly say about me that I haven't said about myself? What could you possibly say that I haven't already admitted or been, put out there in the spotlight? Like, if anything, you're going to say something negative and I'd be like, yeah, I agree. Yeah, I talked about that like 6 months ago. Yeah, I can be weak sometimes. I mentioned that like 20 times in my content. Yeah, sometimes I can be a little pussy, I guess. Yeah, sure. And I don't speak like that about myself, but like, I think you get the point that I'm making. So funnily enough, I actually felt infinitely more vulnerable when I wasn't being vulnerable. There's this article that I wrote recently called Drop the Mask and Embrace Being Authentic. And there's a poem in here I really recommend you read. You can just pause that and read now if you want to, but there's a really great quote that comes from a game that I like called Baldur's Gate 3. And this woman gives you this advice where she says, when it comes to love, vulnerability is armor, truth, a sword, trust, a shield. And I really like that, because that very much mirrors my journey with honesty and vulnerability and openness and just being authentic, right? Like, I really have come to see that being vulnerable is a form of armor. Truth is like a sword. Trust really does, like trusting other people and going first with my trust, like giving my trust out before expecting someone else to trust me. Trust is one of those things, just like love, just like honesty, just like vulnerability, just like truth, where it's like, motherfucker, you're going to have to go first. Like you, the person listening. If you just sit there and expect other people to tell you the truth, it's like, no, why would they? If you expect other people to trust you, why the hell would they trust you? You haven't given them some trust. If you expect them to love you, it's like, have you loved them? Have you loved yourself? If you expect vulnerability, it's like, have you been vulnerable first? No. So why would they? So I've just found it's always nicer to go first. But yeah, I really love that quote because it perfectly like encapsulates what we're talking about here, that, that going first and that bravery and all of that, it actually makes or has made me feel ironically less vulnerable. I feel a lot more strong. I feel a lot more stoic when I'm able to own the parts of myself that aren't perfect, which is, I would just say, all of me. There isn't a single part of me that's perfect. And really embracing that and stepping into that is actual true power, because nobody can hurt you. It's like the David Goggins book, the title of one of his books, Can't Hurt Me. It's like, well, how could you possibly hurt me if I own every single part of me? And then there's nothing to defend. And then there isn't even a war anymore. There's no like defensiveness. There's no, oh, people are trying to hurt me. People are trying to fuck me over. People are going to think I'm a beta male. If somebody walked up to me and said, hey, you're a beta male, or if a woman said, hey, Andy, you're a pussy, I'd be like, yeah, I can see that. And then that's it. That's the fucking conversation. That's the conversation. And so, yeah, there's no vulnerability anymore. There's just a perfect suit of, I mean, not perfect, but a beautiful suit of armor there. And it's not even an armor because you realize that the other person isn't even your fucking enemy and this isn't a war. It's just other human beings trying to do their best. Anyway, that's a separate discussion. But yeah, I really like that. Like, you're not brave for not feeling fear in the first place. You're brave for facing it. So that's one of my other favorite philosophies or things that I say to people. If someone, especially a guy, is wanting to be more honest and authentic and maybe a little more open and vulnerable, whatever that might mean for you. If a guy comes to me and says, I want to do this, but I'm scared, my favorite go-to is like, well, what is masculinity? And masculinity is a sort of nebulous term that means different things to different people. But a lot of people agree on the idea that masculinity, a part of it is facing your fears and having courage. A lot of people associate courage with masculinity. And obviously women can be courageous and are courageous too. But like, those two things are often paired together, right? Courage and masculinity, bravery and masculinity. And so if you're scared to be honest and open, wouldn't it be brave as fuck and courageous as hell to be open and honest? Like, wouldn't that be just the bravest thing that you can do? And that's how I, gently pushed myself to start being honest and open at the start. I literally had the thought in my head of like, I'm so terrified to be honest right now with this woman that's sitting in front of me, or this friend of mine, or this client of mine, or whatever. I'm really terrified to be honest. Wouldn't it be brave as fuck if I did it anyway? Man, that'd be amazing. And I don't expect them to be like, hey, good job, Andy, you're so brave. But like for me, for my ability to look into my own eyes in the mirror and be like, I like what I see. I love what I see. For that ability to be able to be really happy with who I am, this is a great story for that. This is like, if I run towards this fear right now and do this, like admit this thing that I'm nervous about or scared of, or if I'm just honest or authentic, or if I just say like, yo, I'll be honest, I'm really nervous right now, or I'm really scared right now, or, I've kind of struggled with this. I've had this mental health struggle and I'm working through it and here's what I'm doing. But yeah, it is a bit of a struggle sometimes. If I do that, man, that's bravery. And so I did it like literally for my own self-esteem and for my own bravery. And that's how I've gotten to this point now where it's sort of like the David Goggins thing, can't hurt me, but that isn't how I think. I don't think in terms of like, nobody can fucking hurt me. I used to. Now I think more in terms of like, everybody's my friend and nobody's trying to hurt me. Anyway. But yeah, that's helped a lot. So running towards that fear has really helped. And as I was saying before, and again, this applies to women, this applies to everyone, these concepts are universal. If you're the person who's brave and you start running towards your fears and being open and honest and authentic and all of that, you often inspire the partner that you're with or your friends or other random people that see you to do the same thing. And then beautiful things start happening where they start opening up and they start being more courageous and honest and brave and all of that. And you're like, damn, this is amazing. Like, I'm inspiring you, and then you start getting inspired by them because they start showing a tiny little bit of courage and being honest with you. And you're like, damn, thank you for opening up to me about this. This is amazing. And then you go back and forwards and you become more and more honest and more open. And then at some point, you might even get to a point where Imogen and I have been at this point for, I don't know, 3 years at this point. We just like fucking share everything. There's nothing that you wouldn't say. And not even just with each other. Like, we will share everything with all of our friends. I share everything with you guys and girls. I share freaking everything. I share everything with my coaching clients, all of my friends, my family, my parents. We just like say the thing that's in your head. You don't hold back. There's no fear there anymore. And so, vulnerability, I wouldn't even call it vulnerability, because I think that's a clumsy attempt at the word or the concept. I think the word is more like honesty or authenticity or openness, not being closed off. It's something like that. It's like letting go. Letting go of that tension around, I can't say this will be weak. What if they think badly of me? Letting go of the need to control what other people think about you. There's some form of, I guess, manipulation isn't the right word, but there's some form of controlling or an attempt to control what other people think about you when we hold back. When we're closed off, like when we're doing it out of a fear place, you don't have to tell everyone everything if you really don't want to. But like when it's coming from a place of fear, where you're like, I'm terrified of what they might think of me if I open up about this, that's an attempt to control what they think about you. It's an attempt, I guess, to control what the entire fucking world or the universe or just outside people think about you. And in my own life, that didn't feel like strength. That felt like it was coming from a very weak place, a very scared place, like a scared little boy who was scared that other people would bully him or think less of him. And so there's all these different exercises that we can do to like work through this. Probably the best exercise I can give you comes from my video course, the Play to Win video course. And in this chapter, which is called Overcoming Fear, Limiting Beliefs, and Self-Doubt, I talk a ton in here about like running towards your fears and stuff like that. And one of the things I put in here is like a technique that I use all the time when I'm scared of something bad happening. I will ask myself, like, what's the worst thing that could happen here? Like, would I still be okay? And the second question is like, what am I so afraid of? And so when you're afraid of like, what if a woman thinks less of me? Or what if, and for women listening, what if my partner or the person that I'm with thinks less of me? I will ask myself the question of like, what's the worst that will happen if they think less of me? The worst thing that happens is the other person just thinks less of you. And then they either deal with that or, they leave. Like, is that even a bad thing? Why would that be a bad thing? How can you know that's a bad thing? Do you want to have a partner? Do you want to date someone who literally thinks less of you and doesn't like you? Wouldn't that be a beautiful thing if they decided to leave? That would be amazing. Why would you spend time with or want to spend time with a partner that doesn't really respect you or doesn't like you? So yeah, this chapter that I'm referring to here is called Overcoming Fear, Limiting Beliefs, and Self-Doubt. And the video course itself is called Play to Win. There's a link in the description below to this. You can grab this and I've mentioned this a few times. You can just pay whatever you want to pay for this, even if that's just $1, pay $1. But I go through these fears a lot in there. Let's keep reading the rest of this old article that she wrote. I can't help but gush about my boyfriend. If it's not already obvious, I adore Andy. He's made me respect his highlights and flaws because I see a complete and honest person, not some mannequin that does and says all of the right or the alpha things that a man should say. So yeah, that's another concept. Like when you can be open and honest and vulnerable. And again, if you're not perfect with this, first of all, if you don't want to do it, then don't do it. But if you're not perfect with this, you can just improve at this. But when you are open and honest, the other person can drop their mask as well, and they don't have to put up their own like facade of being perfect. When you're trying to be like a perfect alpha male, or for any women listening, when you're trying to put on that, perfect persona, you're teaching your partner that, hey, I lie. Because partners aren't stupid. People aren't stupid. They can tell when you're trying to be really alpha, or you're trying to be perfect, or you're trying to keep it together. You're trying to look like you have your shit together. People can fucking tell. And so you're basically teaching them, hey, it's okay, or it's perfectly normal to lie in a relationship. So what do you think they're going to do when you ask them, hey, how do you feel about this? They're going to just pretend, yep, everything's great. And you're going to go, okay. And you're just both in this weird fucking relationship where you both lie to each other. I think that's how most relationships are, right? Most friendships, most relationships, because people don't understand yet, or they haven't really tried being just deeply honest and authentic and seeing how that goes. And in that article that I showed before, the one Drop the Mask and Embrace Being Authentic, this poem, and again, you can pause the screen and read this poem. such a beautiful example of like what happens or what can happen when we're in a relationship with someone or we're going through our life wearing these masks. We're teaching everybody else, or we're attracting everybody else that has a mask as well. And we'll never find the authentic, or we make it harder to find the authentic, honest people. Because why would an authentic, honest person spend time with someone who has a mask up? You know, as much as I love all of my fellow human beings, I personally, like me, Andy, in my own life, I spend time with the people who are honest and open, authentic and vulnerable. You know, I wouldn't spend time with someone who was wearing a mask all the time and lying and pretending to be an alpha male or an alpha female or any of that sort of stuff. And again, I have nothing but love for them. It's not like I'd run away screaming from them, but they're just not going to be in my life. And so if we're looking for those deeper, honest, authentic connections where we can feel intimacy, feel affection, feel love, you know, express all of those things and feel understood, a big part of that is you go first. If you want those things, you start doing those things. You know, practice them in your own life, give them to yourself, give yourself that self-love and that self-honesty, and then start baby steps expressing it with other people. So she goes on to say, I've never had the feeling of, oh God, why is he telling me about his struggles and flaws? It actually does the opposite. It makes me feel closer to him. I don't think I've ever had my friends ever say anything that involves, oh, I hate it when my boyfriend is emotionally vulnerable or opens up to me. Yeah. She goes on to say, I'll admit there's a huge difference between Andy being honest about doubts versus being depressed or needy, but there is a massive jump to get from one extreme to the other. Yeah, and like I said before, it's that podcast or the couple of podcasts that I talked about, you know, how to be vulnerable but masculine, and then how to, you know, be vulnerable but don't be weak. And again, for a recap, the concept is basically you just say, here's something I'm struggling with, but, you know, I'll work through it. Or, you know, you can even say, do you have any suggestions? Or, you know, is there anything you would suggest? Or I'm going to ask my friends, or here's what I'm going to try, or, you know, I'm going to go to counseling. Like you just have some sort of plan, or you ask for some advice or something, rather than saying, oh, life sucks. My boss is so mean to me. It's not fair. I think most of us understand the difference between like complaining and like dumping a burden on someone else versus sort of having a little bit more ownership of it. I think that's the key word here, is like saying, oh, it's out of my control. It's not fair. It's happening to me. Most of us don't like that. But if we can embrace it and say, okay, like I'm going to be okay. I'm going to figure this out. Like I don't know how. I don't know what the fuck to do. I'm feeling very emotional and all of this, but like I'm going to start fixing this. That's what people respect. So people respect the idea of stepping up to the plate and working on it, even if you need some help with that, even if you want to ask questions and, you know, have other people listen to you and vent a little bit and all of that. People are fine with that. People love that. If anything, people respect that. So yeah, that's the difference. As she says here, like the difference is between like being honest about your doubts versus being needy and being sort of like depressed about it. But I think the neediness is there, like putting your burden on the other person and saying, I need you to fix this for me. It's like, no, the other person can help you. The other person will give you advice and love you and talk you through it. And like, definitely ask for help, of course. I mean, I'm literally a coach. My job is to help people who ask me for help. But if someone came to me and said, my life sucks, it's not fair. And I was like, okay, like, what do you need from me? How can I help? And they're like, nothing. It's just, it really sucks. It's like, okay, well, I can't, no, I can't help you. I don't want to spend time with you. I'll love you, but I'm not going to spend time with that. So I think we understand that. She goes on to say, I will also note that I am yet to meet an emotionally healthy girl that was turned off by a guy with a reasonable level of emotional availability. If anything, I feel more attached and loyal to Andy because of how much we share with each other, because I know that he struggles sometimes. It's funny, struggle isn't a word that we would use anymore, but this article was obviously written 3 or so years ago when our mindsets around peace and happiness and not suffering and not struggling and all of that was a little bit different, but yeah. The point still carries across. I feel like we've gone through more together, and ultimately it makes me want to stick around. Yeah, that's another thing, right? Honesty is a really beautiful way. Honesty, openness, communication, all of those kind of things, you know, like call it vulnerability if you want to, but openness seems to resonate better with me. openness is a really beautiful way to build a connection. Even if you're literally just having casual sex, I am this honest. I said it before, I'm honest with everyone, but like I'm this deeply honest with girls that we're just having casual sex with. I'm like this fucking honest. Like, why wouldn't I be? I'm this honest with you guys. I'm this honest with all of my clients, all of my friends. Like, we're just this honest. And you build something really beautiful. You pave the pathway to connection, to intimacy, even if that's just in a casual sex setting. The casual sex is a million times better too. I've talked about that concept a bunch of times. Like when you're honest, when you share the things that you're struggling with and how you're going to embrace them and you take ownership of them, and when you're really open like that, the sex is better. Because especially if we're going to talk about kinky sex or really dirty sex or really passionate, amazing, intimate, emotional sex, spiritual sex, tantric sex, all of these different types of sex that I think most people want to have. I think most people want to have better sex, right? Again, I haven't met a person who's like, no, I want my sex to be worse. So most people want to have better sex or amazing sex, really great, intimate, beautiful sex. And part of that requires trusting, being naked with someone, being in a position where they can see essentially all of you. And if you're a woman, having someone be inside of you. And if you're a man, there's sort of can be the feeling of like, I got to do a good job. And you don't have to, but like a lot of men put that pressure on themselves. Like, I got to perform for her. And for women, it's like, I hope he accepts me. Being in that very vulnerable place, that requires some level of trust. It requires a lot of vulnerability. And if you practice vulnerability with the people that you're having sex with or having relationships with, it makes that moment where you're intimate in the bedroom more comfortable, more effortless, more easy, more intimate, more beautiful, more passionate, more kinky, more filthy, more nasty, more all of these things that you might want because you've practiced it outside the bedroom. The sex is literally 1,000 million trillion times better. A big part of the reason why I have a sex life that I'm so unbelievably grateful for and happy with, BDSM, kinks, threesomes, my girlfriend, intimacy, when we're just, when it's just her and I, like all of this beautiful stuff, is because of the vulnerability outside of the bedroom. So that when we go into the bedroom, it's like, this feels safe. I feel like I can let go. We all feel like we can let go and just be our honest, authentic, vulnerable selves because we practiced it outside the bedroom. But if you have less of that, if there's less honesty and openness outside the bedroom, if the other person doesn't trust you and maybe you don't fully trust them, then why the fuck would you let go? It's not very easy to be safe around someone that you don't trust, is it? It's not very easy or safe to be fully open and vulnerable around someone that you're not really sure what's going to happen if you do go to that vulnerable place. And so if you're able to practice it outside the bedroom, man, the sex is just like 1,000,000,000 times better. Plus, as Imogen said, it sort of makes you both happy to stick around more. And there's no guarantees in relationships, obviously. I think if you go into a relationship wanting it to last forever, that's really just not a healthy or happy mindset. I prefer to be a little bit more attached, the Buddhist mindset of non-attachment. I love it when I'm with someone, and if they ever want to separate, hey, that's beautiful. I want them to be happy. I want them to go on their own path. And if that's not with me, that's amazing. If it is with me, that's amazing. So, but people are far more happy and likely and excited to stick around when you're both more open, when you're both more honest. You know what I mean? There's more of a connection there. She goes on to say, in short, I'm very glad he doesn't bother putting up some alpha facade because at the end of the day, we can both be honest and real with one another. If you're looking at changing your perspective on being alpha, I can verify that I am at the very least one girl that is far more on board with an open and honest guy. If both myself and all of my friends seem to feel this way, I'm almost certain that it means that there are other girls, if not most girls, out there for you that feel the same way. Yeah, so I like that point. Where she's like, look, like, even if you're going to say like, oh, but maybe Imogen is an exception. She's like, well, there's one exception on the fucking planet, me. So maybe you can go find another exception. And as she says, like, no, most, the concept is funny, like of a woman being like, man, like, I don't like that my boyfriend opens up to me and is honest about things he's struggling with so that I don't feel so alone when I'm struggling with something. And so we can build this beautiful, intimate connection together and be honest and authentic and share our deepest, heartfelt feelings and all of that shit. Like, yeah. And again, there might be some women who are not comfortable with that intimacy and that connection and all of that and that honesty, because it can require a little bit of trust. Like I say, you go first if you want this, and that can require a bit of a leap. This entire question is basically saying, Andy, I'm scared of opening up because what if something bad happens? So Again, if you're really scared of that, I would go through my video course that I mentioned. I have a whole chapter on like what to do with fears, like when you have a fear of honesty and vulnerability and going first and all of that. So the link is in the description below to that. But I'll leave you with, I'm probably going to leave all of these links in the description so you can just check out all of the articles and podcasts that I've mentioned. But this article is one that I wrote about like alpha and how I used to put all this pressure on myself to be this like perfect alpha male. And where's the other one? This one as well. So this is a more recent one. This was written, in 2023, so earlier this year, like 8 months ago. So this is a girl, one of the girls that we're dating and seeing right now. At this point in time, as I record this right this second, we've been seeing her for about a year. In fact, next week, I believe, is our 1 year anniversary, so to speak, of dating her. So that'll be cool. We might do something nice, something special, but she's a great human being. She wrote this article. So this girl that we're seeing wrote this article, and it's from her point of view. And she talks about specifically like, honesty and vulnerability, like from me and from Imogen, and what that's been like from her. And spoiler alert, she basically echoes Imogen's article and says the same sort of shit. Like, I'm really glad that they're both so honest and open to me, or open with me, and she says here, like, I'm so grateful to be dating them. I'm enjoying the process. There's zero drama. Yeah, I can't even imagine us having any drama. And I'm receiving exactly what I want. How a lot of it comes down to openness and honesty. Andy and Imogen have made dating so easy by just being very open and honest. She goes on to say, coming from dating situations where the people I've dated haven't been very open or honest, it has been an eye-opener for how I want to approach dating from now on. Previously, I've felt confused, frustrated, very insecure, and uncertain of what the other person I was dating wanted. I'd get mixed signals as to whether I was just hooking up with someone or if we were building a stronger connection. In return for their lack of honesty, and this is a point that I've made in this video a few times now, I didn't feel comfortable expressing what I wanted. It's what I mean when I say the universe is a mirror. If these guys that she was dating, and these guys were doing their best, you know what I mean? Like, these guys weren't doing a bad job, to be clear, but if these guys weren't being super honest and super open and telling her what they wanted and all of that kind of stuff, then why the fuck would she start being open and honest and authentic? And then, if we talk about, you could say maybe these guys just wanted to hook up and have sex, and yeah, beautiful. But for some of you that want to just hook up and have casual sex and do all of that kind of stuff, I'm assuming you want to have good casual sex, right? Like, I'm assuming you don't just want to have shit casual sex. And a big part of great sex, as I said earlier, is like opening up and that vulnerability and that honesty. You don't have to like on day one, on the first date, be like, oh, by the way, like, here's everything I'm scared of and here's my laundry list. Like, no, it's not that. It's like dipping your toe in the water and just being a little honest. Like, you can go baby steps at a time, right? Like, you don't have to dump it all out on the first date, but when we can open up a little bit, even casual sex, as I said, is like 1,000 times better. This girl that we're dating, who, the girl that wrote this article, the sex we have is like pretty fucking fantastic and pretty like goddamn open, and she's told us all of her kinks and we've told her all of our weird kinks, and we can just be completely like slutty and filthy and dirty and nasty and beautiful and all those wonderful things. And it's passionate, beautiful, emotional sex at times. It can be all of these wonderful things because we're being so bloody honest with each other. She goes on in the same article to talk a little bit about honesty and how sometimes you can have a fear if you start being honest and all of that. So I'll leave this article here. You can read most of it, but the key point to read is, I really respect Andy. He is one of the sweetest, strongest, most confident men I know, and a lot of that is because he is so open and honest about his struggles. I believe vulnerability makes a man appear stronger, more confident. I feel a lot of the time when it comes to dating, men feel terrified to share anything that they've ever struggled with or are struggling with out of fear of being thought of as weak. That was the original question that started this podcast, right? But by not sharing your struggles, you're not only being dishonest to the person that you're seeing, but you're also being dishonest to yourself. You're telling yourself that having struggles makes you weak, which is a funny lie, isn't it? Because it's like, bro, like, what? Find me a human being that's never struggled at least once in their entire life. And life doesn't have to be a struggle. I no longer struggle. I've come to see that that's a separate discussion. But in the past, I struggled 1 billion times, right? And so go find me a human being who doesn't struggle. Why would you be weak for having struggles? No, congratulations. You would be human for having struggles. So she goes on to say, most women will respect you a lot more for being open and vulnerable with them instead of hiding things. being open and honest. This was the point that I made before. Being open and honest can take a lot of courage. Yes, it literally can require courage. So wouldn't that be a masculine, beautiful thing to do? Wouldn't that be a lovely, brave thing to do? So that is that. I hope that answered that question. If anyone else has any questions about, anything, but these kind of topics, then hell yeah, I'm all for that. If you would like, I'll leave a link in the description to all of these articles and podcasts and bits and pieces. But again, the one that I really recommend is, look at this. Look at this thumbnail. AI did this thumbnail with me photoshopping and fixing it up a little bit. But man, AI's come a long way. But this video course, yeah, it's literally, I've said this a million times. I poured my heart and soul into this damn thing. I worked on this for like months and months and months, just like nonstop, full time, like 10 hours a day. This is everything that I have learned over the last like 10 or 15 years. Every mindset, every philosophy. It's how essentially, this is the playbook on how I went from depressed and suicidal to living a life of abundance and joy. This is like how I can be in a state of peace and bliss and happiness and see the world as my friend all the time and not get bogged down by stuff. So I'll leave a link in the description below to this. As I said, you can literally just pay $1 for it. I don't want the information that's in here to be locked off to people because they don't have enough money. So go grab this. It's like 4 hours or whatever it is, 3 hours long, and the book is like 145 pages. So I put a lot of love and effort into that. If you would like any more help, more direct help, I offer coaching. I got 2 tiers. You can sit down with me for a one-on-one call. Those are $200. Or you can join our hardcore 12-week all-in coaching program plus lifelong accountability. We got a little accountability group. You get to be in there for life. Links in the description below to both of those. As always, ladies, gentlemen, others, and water bottles. We don't want to exclude the beautiful water bottles. Go out there, crush those goals, and have a wonderful, enjoyable time while you do it. And guess what? Because you're an absolute legend and you stuck around to the end, you get to hear about my amazing one-on-one coaching deal that I'm offering just for a limited amount of time. Oh my God. That's right. I'm offering one-on-one coaching with me and access to my group coaching program. You get to sit down with me and do a one-on-one call every single week, as well as a group coaching call every single week. You get access to me every single day. You can send me messages. I will get in there. I will build you that amazing life that you have been dreaming of, whether that's sex, whether that's dating, money, relationships, happiness, peace, whatever it might be that you want. Let's make it happen together. And if you pay in full, you get an extra 4 weeks instead of the usual 3 months. Here is just a little bit of what some of our clients have achieved. Taylor had a threesome, tons of sex, embraced honesty with girls he's dating, embraced peace and love, and he's a coach in our program too. Laz, look at this handsome guy, and I'm not just saying that because he's bald. He more than doubled his monthly income, earning $45K a month. He had a ton of sex, embraced honesty, and did so much more. Corky had a threesome, sex with 7 women. We helped him start his own business, and he learned to love himself. And look at that cool BDSM picture. Legend. All of that and more is yours for $20,000, and we have payment plans as long as you pay $10K up front, and we can negotiate the rest of the payment plan. Link in the description below. Click that, mention that you want one-on-one coaching, and let's do something amazing together. Limited time only. This is the only time I'm going to offer this. Let's go, baby.